Theater buzzed with excitement. Lights danced across the stage as contestant after contestant took their turn. But when an elderly Filipino man stepped slowly into the spotlight, the energy shifted. His steps were careful, his shoulders slightly hunched, and his clothes were modest, a plain white barong and worn-out shoes. The chatter faded into whispers. The host smiled kindly. "Sir, what's your name?" The man bowed slightly. "My name is Manuel Santos, 68 years old, a retired soldier." The crowd erupted in respectful applause. Simon Cowell, sitting at the center of the judges' table, raised an eyebrow with interest. "A veteran," he murmured softly. "And what will you be doing for us today?" Manuel smiled faintly, his voice trembling. "I'll be playing the piano. A song I wrote, for the men I served with, the ones who never came home." The audience fell silent. Even the background music faded away. The camera zoomed in on Manuel's weathered hands as he gently touched the piano keys, adjusting the small photo frame placed on top, a faded picture of young soldiers smiling under a Philippine flag. Simon leaned forward, sensing the weight of the moment. "Take your time," he said quietly. Manuel took a deep breath, eyes glistening. "I don't have much left in life," he whispered, "but their memory still plays inside me." The lights dimmed, a single spotlight surrounding him. The hall grew so still that even the sound of his breathing could be heard. Then, he closed his eyes, lifted his fingers, and let the first note drift softly into the air, carrying with it a lifetime of pain, pride, and unspoken love. The magic had begun. The first note floated through the air, soft, trembling, and hauntingly beautiful. It was as if the piano itself remembered the stories of war and sacrifice. The melody began slow, fragile like an old memory trying to find its voice again. Each key Manuel pressed seemed to speak, not in sound alone, but in emotion, sorrow, courage, and an aching kind of love. The judges sat perfectly still. Simon Cowell's usual serious expression softened. His eyes followed every movement of Manuel's wrinkled hands, watching them glide over the keys with both grace and pain. The camera zoomed in on his trembling fingers, calloused from years of service, now finding peace in music. Behind him, the large LED screen flickered to life, showing faded photos of young soldiers smiling in uniforms, waving Philippine flags, sharing laughter amid chaos. Then came black and white images of battlefields, a reminder of what those smiles had cost. The audience gasped, their hearts gripped by the story unfolding through every note. The melody swelled. What started as a whisper grew into a cry, a call for every forgotten hero. Tears streamed down the faces of the audience, even the judges couldn't look away. One mother in the crowd clutched her chest, whispering, "That's my son's song." Manuel's face was calm, yet his eyes told another story, one of loss, survival, and a promise never broken. The music rose higher, lifting the entire room into an emotional storm. Then, as the final note of the first part echoed, Manuel paused, his hand hovering in the air. The theater was silent, no breath, no sound, only the echo of that note hanging like a prayer. And in that silence, every soul in the room felt his pain. The music reached a powerful crescendo, filling the AGT Manila Theater with emotion so raw that it felt almost sacred. Then, suddenly, Manuel's hands froze. The piano fell silent. His shoulders shook slightly as he bowed his head. For a moment, everyone thought it was part of the performance, but then they saw the tears glistening on his cheeks. He took a trembling breath and whispered into the microphone, "I'm sorry. It's just, every time I play this part, I see their faces again." The audience watched in stunned silence. Simon's eyes softened, his hand slowly moving to his chest. Judge Lee Salonga leaned forward, whispering, "Take your time, sir." Manuel gently wiped his tears and smiled through them. "I promised my brothers in arms that I would keep their music alive," he said, voice breaking, "and this is how I keep that promise." He placed his fingers back on the keys, but this time, there was no hesitation. The next notes burst out stronger, filled with pride and defiance. The soft melody from before transformed into a triumphant anthem, a tribute to courage, loyalty, and the spirit of the Filipino soldier. The camera panned across the audience, people standing, crying, holding their hearts. The music seemed to lift everyone together, as though the spirits of Manuel's fallen comrades were rising with each note. Then came the final section, slow, powerful, and pure. Manuel pressed the last key, holding it as his hands trembled above the piano. The note lingered like a heartbeat fading into eternity. When it ended, there was total silence. Then, a roar of applause. People stood to their feet, clapping, cheering, shouting his name. And Manuel simply bowed, whispering, "For them." Cowell didn't move. He sat perfectly still, eyes locked on Manuel, his usually firm expression softened into something almost childlike. When the noise finally quieted, he stood slowly, his voice low but full of emotion. "Manuel," he began, pausing as he searched for the right words. "I've been doing this for years. I've heard singers, dancers, musicians from all over the world. But what you just did," he stopped, his voice cracking slightly. "That wasn't just music, that was truth." The audience fell silent again, hanging on every word. Simon took a deep breath, visibly fighting back tears. "You played with your soul," he continued, "and I think everyone in this room felt it." "I certainly did." Judge Lee Salonga wiped a tear and nodded. "Sir, you didn't just play the piano, you told a story our nation will never forget." The host stepped forward, saying softly, "Simon, or you." Simon didn't wait. He looked at Manuel, then at the golden button in front of him. Without hesitation, he slammed his hand down. The golden buzzer exploded. A burst of golden confetti filled the air, swirling around Manuel like a shower of light. The crowd screamed in joy. The other judges stood, clapping and cheering as the music swelled again. Manuel's hands went to his face, tears pouring freely. The host rushed to the stage, hugging him tightly. Simon walked up to the piano and shook Manuel's hand with both of his. "You reminded us," Simon said softly, "that real music doesn't come from fame or training. It comes from the heart, and yours is the bravest one I've ever seen." The crowd roared again, a golden moment no one would ever forget. Golden confetti rained from the ceiling like a storm of blessings. The lights glimmered off every piece, turning the entire AGT Manila 2025 stage into a sea of gold. Manuel stood frozen in disbelief, his trembling hands covering his face as the crowd shouted his name, "Manuel! Manuel! Manuel!" Simon Cowell, still on stage beside him, smiled through misty eyes. He placed a reassuring hand on the veteran's shoulder. "You've made history tonight," Simon said gently. "This is what the golden buzzer was made for." Lee Salonga joined them, bowing deeply before the elderly man. "You didn't just play a song," she said emotionally, "you gave us a piece of our history, a reminder of the heroes who gave us freedom." Manuel looked around, overwhelmed. The audience was standing, thousands of people applauding, crying, waving small Philippine flags. The camera panned to the crowd, families embracing, veterans saluting, children cheering with bright eyes. The host held the microphone out to him. "Sir, how do you feel right now?" Manuel took a deep breath, voice shaking but strong. "I feel like my brothers heard me tonight," he said softly. "This song wasn't just for me. It was for every soldier who never got to come home." The audience erupted once again, chanting his name louder, stronger, prouder. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he gazed upward, whispering, "Para sa inyo ito, mga kapatid ko." "This is for you, my brothers." The final shot showed Manuel standing beside his piano, bathed in golden light, his face glowing with peace. Behind him, the big screen displayed the words, "Golden Buzzer winner, Manuel Santos, the hero WHO played for the fallen." And as the lights dimmed, one thing was certain, the world would never forget his song.